What happens when you're very anxious is that you expect the world to be an anxious place. No surprises then when you realise that the world is an anxious place. And then, of course, you're justified in feeling anxious because the world is very hostile and is out to get you, and paranoia, all sorts of depression loom on the horizon, all because of this early conditioning. You may have had a different sort of conditioning, but you were conditioned in some way or form, and it's so deep and so fundamental that for most of us we don't even question it. We think this is who I am, this is the, this is how I deal with life. And then we're incapable of change because we still feel that we're a victim to all of that early childhood stuff. I would come through immigration into the US, and that's a great place for testing out if you've got anxiety. They seem to do it on purpose. I'm not sure that is the case. However, since 9/11, it's become a very sort of anxious place to enter. And they may have their reasons for all of that, of course. Sometimes, even before I got off the aeroplane, halfway over the Atlantic or the Pacific, whichever way, I'd start to feel in the body the symptoms of anxiety. Is it the air conditioning? Is it the food? Is it the fact that I'm in this tiny little metal tube flying, 3.5 miles above sea level, that could disintegrate at any moment? Well, I don't know. But on the ground, in the customs immigration hall, it was always the same. Very strong feelings of anxiety. And anxiety I use because it's common. Because most people have experienced it. You know what it is. You get this feeling in the gut. It starts here. And then it spreads through the body until your hands are cold and sweaty. And you're starting, you're a bit paranoia, looking around, who's after you. Huh? The body is actually going absolutely into hysterics. You're feeling really, really uncomfortable. And then, of course, what's happening? The body has become anxious physically, chemically, so this is poisoning my gut. Anxiety is what creates ulcers. And you're doing it to yourself. There was no one out there doing it to me. Although, at that point, I was convinced that it was all those people out there who were making me feel anxious, because that was the conditioning that I grew up with. Didn't have a choice. And so then I start to become anxious. The body becomes anxious, it transmits anxiety. Everywhere you go, people go, ooh, don't like that. Huh? And of course, when you get to the man doing the passport thing, he's trained to pick up anxiety. It's not just sort of processing, looking at a computer screen. He's a little detector radar sort of working. Oh, anxiety, this one's anxious. Wonder why. Off to the room with no windows for you for a couple of hours while we try and shake you down and work out why you're so anxious. Anybody? Is this ringing a bell with anybody? I've been in the room with the little room with no windows. I've seen people in there look like they've been there for 3 months.
Wow.
Why? If I really look at things, I have no reason to be anxious. Not in that situation. I have a history of anxiety, but this situation, as it currently presents, there really is no reason I should be anxious now. Why do I continue to feed that? Because what happens if I start to feed it, I become anxious. My body develops all of these chemicals, these feelings of anxiety, and then I start to affect all of you. And if you have a history, even a tiny little bit of history of anxiety, you're going to be affected by it. Then what happens? You're sitting there and you're feeling okay, and then all of a sudden, it doesn't feel so good. And you start thinking you're feeling anxious, of course, and then your conditioning Everybody's conditioning is to identify with the phenomena. Anxiety. I'm anxious. Don't know why, but hang on. And the body has become anxious. Your body. Where did it come from? Is it your feeling? It's only your feeling because you have, probably on a subconscious level, taken it on board, identified with it, and become that feeling. You've energized it. Without awareness, I mean, why would anybody with awareness energize anxiety? That's crazy. It's not something we would do consciously on purpose. But we do it anyway. We energize that feeling. And so, of course, then anxiety all of a sudden has become an epidemic. It's contagious. It's an airborne disease. It's a weapon of mass hallucination. And it's being used, you can laugh, it's being used all of the time. Far more insidious. It doesn't come in little envelopes that are checked through the mail. It doesn't come in bombs. It exists all around you all of the time. But if you continue to identify with it, if you continue to buy into it, you remain a part of the problem because you feed it. So then, if someone comes running into the room and gives you this sort of flaming torch and say, okay, you're it, off you go. And you don't know why, you're just running away and you're holding the torch of anxiety and you give it to somebody else and of course you're still feeling it. And everybody as soon has developed this huge state of anxiety about the financial state of the country, about the peace state, about this, about that, about save the whales, about the crops, about this. And then so it goes on and on and on. And we continue to energize all of these emotions. As we energize them, we become them. As we become them, we transmit, we act as amplifiers for those emotions. And then everybody around us is caught in the same situation, lost in an emotion, an energy, a chemical. If you get down to the basics, you're lost in the addiction to a chemical. How crazy is that?